and welcome to another tutorial. This video is the third and final part of my series on my new Lang. So I'll put the previous videos in the series in the top right corner of the screen now. I'll make the mastering chain I use in this video available in the description for free, but be aware I will be using some third-party plugins from Waves and iZotope. I will also link the final master of the track in the description. To make this clear, I do not regard myself as a mastering engineer, although I have done my fair share of mastering. Even if you're sending your music to a mastering engineer, I'd recommend mastering it yourself beforehand. I don't mean that you should try and get your engineer to master your master, but that mastering your tracks before you send the mix down can help expose issues with your mix. Assuming you can master with some degree of competence, you can then fix these before you send your mix to the engineer. This can be true if you're over compressing elements in your mix, as mastering will compress these further. Mastering can also make pops and clicks more audible, making them easier to spot and remove in your mix. When I was mastering my track, I noticed that some of the S's in the rapped vocal were too loud, so I went back to the mix and manually de-essed them using volume automation. It can also be useful sending your rough master to your engineer, as it can give an idea of what you're looking for. As with my mixing video, I will be using You've Been Gone by My New Lang as a reference, but this time I will be paying careful attention to its loudness. I will be paying close attention to the reference's peak and RMS values and using iZotope Alloy 2 as my metering plugin. The main thing you need to know about RMS is that it represents an average loudness over time. Many other videos go in depth with regards to metering, so I'm not going to go into as much detail here. So this is my project. I've got an unwarped stereo bounce of my mix here with no compression or limiting on the master when it was exported. The bounce is a 44.1 kilohertz 24-bit WAV. As you can see, I've turned down the reference track by a few dB, so its level is comparable to the pre-masters. I will turn up both tracks later when I start to use the limiter. If you're satisfied with the frequency balance within your mix, arguably you shouldn't need to use any EQ. However, if you're mastering someone else's track, you may wish to make changes, especially if they send you a wildly different reference track. Although in this case, you may wish to tell them to alter their mix and resend a new bounce. In this case, the reference is a bit brighter, so I'm going to high boost my track a little using this EQ. I'm then going to boost the sub-frequencies very slightly to reflect the reference. Just a very, very small boost there. I'm then going to add some EQ8s. With a high pass filter around 30 to 35 Hertz to make sure the low boost doesn't emphasize any rumble. I'm going to use the J37 from Waves to apply some mild harmonic distortion to the pre-master, choosing the preset which helps my mix get closest to the master. This saturation also adds some compression, which will help with the track's consistency. Yep, I'm happy with that. As I do in my mixes, I try and contrast the sub-frequencies between my track and the reference in mastering. I've put an EQ3 on the master channel and soloed the low band below 80 Hertz. I've noticed that in my mix, things seem to pump more. If we listen to the sub-frequencies of You've Been Gone, you can't hear the kick very well because the bass is what's emphasized. In my mix, since the kick is louder than the bass, that's why everything seems to pump a little more. And adding broadband compression will probably increase this sensation, as we'll see later. My solution is to use a small amount of multiband compression via isotope alloy, although you could use the stock Ableton multiband compressor as well. Changing it to RMS to make sure the compression is smooth. Increasing the attack to make sure that the transients aren't cut. We can do a before and after. So as you can hear, the multiband compressor just glues things together a little bit more. We can compare back with the reference track now. My only concern is that my track is a bit overly bassy now. That's better. Take the EQ off. We can also use this as an opportunity to mono the track below 200 Hertz. 200 Hertz is quite high, but I really want to make sure that the low end is very mono-compatible. You could do it at any point from about 100 Hertz to 200 Hertz. It's not going to make a huge amount of difference here because I've already done it in the mix. You can also use the utility in Ableton to mono the bass frequencies. For mastering, you generally want to choose a transparent sounding compressor and one that is not too fast acting. I usually use the glue compressor in Ableton. Bus or VCA style compression, like the glue, is best for mastering as they tend to sound smoother and less colored than other compressors. I'll usually use a slow attack and a medium release for smoothness and to preserve transients, but experimenting with these parameters is always worthwhile. I'll also choose a low ratio so that the compression acts more equally across louder and quieter sections. I'll adjust the threshold so that the music starts to pump and then increase it until it no longer pumps. During the loudest parts of the track, I often find that this is around 4 dBs of gain reduction. Black rose in a black cloud. I find the auto setting on the glue works well for mastering as well on the release. We can increase the makeup gain to get back to the level that the track was at before the compression was applied. I'm going to link an article in the description that has influenced my approach to using compression in mastering. If the music doesn't pump, but my drums sound very flat and lifeless, then I know I need to go back and tweak the mix. You should also look for any perceived volume changes between quieter and louder sections, as this can suggest you're using too much compression in mastering or that the ratio of your compressor is too high. It's crucial not to squash your mix too much during the limiting process, as too much limiting can cause the master to lose dynamics and create distortions. The Ableton limiter is awful for mastering, so I invested in the Waves L3, which is much better. I'm turning the reference track back up, and I'm going to use iZotope Alloy on the master channel to check both the peak and the RMS values of both my track and the reference. I can then look to recreate these within my master. I'm going to make sure to turn my headphones down as well, because this is going to be much louder. You've Been Gone is mastered to 0 dB. Normally, I'd recommend mastering to between -0.3 and -1.5 dBs. Masters for SoundCloud, for example, should be between -1.5 dB and -1 dB, because the SoundCloud algorithm adds 1.5 dBs of noise. However, this version of You've Been Gone is from Beatport, meaning it has been mastered for DJs at a higher peak value. We can also see the RMS values jumping around down here. I'm not as good a mix or mastering engineer as those who worked on this track, so if I can't get mine quite as loud, it's not going to bother me too much. We can start the limiting process now. I'm mastering to -0.3 dB. Try the different algorithms here. I'm just going to turn You've Been Gone down by -0.3 dB, as having Alloy on the master can add some extra volume, and we don't want clipping. You can also make this limiter more tolerant of bass frequencies by increasing the priority for the bass bands. I've spent some time tweaking the master on my monitors, because obviously mastering on headphones is not ideal, and I'm ready to bounce. So let's listen and compare mine to the reference. quite as loud, but not incredibly far away either. I've also altered the EQ slightly to take away some more of the superfluous frequencies from the sub area. And I've taken some of the woofiness out of the kick as well at about 95 Hertz. Just make sure to deactivate any plugin on the master channel before you export, as they can potentially increase the volume and therefore cause clipping. I've also done a little fade at the end of the master, so things tail off more smoothly. And yeah, that's it. As I said, I'm not a mastering engineer, and this is just my approach to mastering. Hopefully this has been helpful if you're a beginner or have tried mastering in the past but haven't been able to get your desired results. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.